Shalom, everyone. It's Nathaniel. We're going to continue with our study in the book of Revelation. We are circling to land, so to speak. We've got one more week where we will be in the book of Revelation and maybe an additional week to wrap up, and then we'll move as the Most High instructs. This week, we're going to be looking at Revelation chapter 18. Before we get started, however, we want to continue to remind our study participants that the scriptures tell us to study to show ourselves approved unto the Most High, workmen who need not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth, and that all scripture is God-breathed and is profitable for doctrine, for reproof, for correction, for instruction in righteousness, that the man and the woman of the Most High may be complete, thoroughly furnished unto every good work. And that's because we do have work to do. So we're going to be looking at, again, Revelation chapter 18. So what we're going to do first is to bring up the scripture, and then we will go ahead and read Revelation chapter 18. I was sure that I had brought that in there. Oh, there it is. Okay, sorry to stall a little bit. Okay, so Revelation chapter 18, and we're going to begin with verse 1. And after these things, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power, and the earth was lighted with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the Great is fallen, and is become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. For all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that you be not partakers of her sins, and that you receive not of her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and Yahuwah has remembered her iniquities. Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her, double according to her works. In the cup which she has filled to her double. How much she has glorified herself and lived deliciously. So much torment and sorrow give her. For she says in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is Yahuwah who judges her. And the kings of the earth, who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her, shall bewail her and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning, when they shall see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off, for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is your judgment come. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buys their merchandise anymore. The merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones and of pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet and all thyine wood, and all manner of vessels of ivory, and all manner vessels of most precious wood, and of brass and iron and marble, and cinnamon and odors and ointments and frankincense and wine and oil, and fine flour and wheat and beast and sheep and horses and chariots and slaves and souls of men. And the fruits that your soul lusts after are departed from you, and all things which were dainty and goodly are departed from you, and you shall find them no more at all. The merchants of these things which were made rich by her shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple and scarlet, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, for in 1 hour so great riches is come to nothing. And every shipmaster and all the company in ships and sailors and as many as trade by sea stood afar off and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like unto this great city? And they cast dust on their heads and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea, by reason of her costliness, for in 1 hour she is made desolate. Rejoice over her, heaven, and you holy apostles and prophets, for Yahuwah has avenged you on her. And a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. And the voice of harpers and musicians and of pipers and trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in you, and no craftsman of whatsoever craft he be shall be found any more in you, and the sound of a millstone shall be heard no more at all in you, and the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in you, and the voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall be heard no more at all in you, for your merchants were the great men of the earth, for by your sorceries were all nations deceived. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. Revelation chapter 18. So now we're going to go into the slides and talk in more detail. What we read in Revelation chapter 18 was actually the details of what happened in Revelation chapter 17. And so, okay, I'm not sure if that showed yet, so let me do it one more time. Okay, so last time we were in Revelation chapter 17, and we were talking about still at the with the theme of the sevens. We were looking at the 7 heads of the dragon, the 7 crowns, the 7 kings, and the 7 mountains. And so we left our study last week looking at this chart, and we see that in when it comes to the dragon of Revelation, that's where the 7 heads are mentioned. That's where the 7 crowns are mentioned. Those crowns are diadem, which are worn by kings. And then we talked about the beast that came out of the sea that had 7 heads in Revelation chapter 13, verse 1. And again, we see similar language. But in this case, there were 10 crowns on the 7 heads, 10 horns, and one of the heads was wounded. The beast that came out of the sea had the body of a leopard, the feet of a bear, the mouth of a lion, and the name of blasphemy written on it. And we're going to be looking further into that as well. The dragon actually empowers the beast out of the sea, and it's that beast out of the sea that makes war with the saints, that 7-headed beast. Okay, that's where the 7 comes in. That 7-headed beast that makes war with the saints has power over all kindred. So this again is a worldwide situation when it comes to the saints, which are the holy ones, and the holy ones are the people of the Most High. At this particular point in time, this beast that comes out of the sea has the power to make war with them and to overcome them. And so that's another part of the theme. We talked also last time about the sea representing people groups, ethnicities, if you will, nations, which is the same thing as a large ethnic group. So the beast comes out of all the nations of the world and manifests itself from the energy of all of those nations. And then in chapter 17, this same beast is outlined again, and this time more detail is given, but there's a harlot that's sitting on this beast. So the beast with the 7 heads also has a harlot that is sitting on it. The harlot is covered with colored with scarlet. There's the names of blasphemy on the beast as well as the harlot. That beast comes out of the abyss, but we're still talking about the same beast. And then in John 17, verse 12, and Second Thessalonians 2:3, we also know that that beast eventually is going to be going into perdition. John 17:12 talks about the son of perdition. So perdition is a place of judgment and punishment. So that eventually that's where this beast is headed. Okay. And then we also learned that beast, there are 7 kings that are involved with that beast. There are 10 horns, which also represent 10 kings. And eventually that beast that the whore is sitting on turns on the whore and makes the whore desolate. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. But it's that beast then that ultimately makes war with the Lamb, and that's when the beast is destroyed. Whenever the beast comes up against the Lamb, then that beast's days are over when it comes to its ability to function on this earth. The last 7 that we talked about were the 7 mountains. And the question is, could that be the Roman Empire? Because Rome was set on 7 mountains. But as we talked last week in our study, there are many cities and many nations, actually, either nation states or cities, that are built on 7 literal mountains. It's about 70 of them altogether. So, but in the context of our study, it does make sense that the Roman Empire that John was living through and all of the ramifications of being a part of a body of people that the Roman Empire had come strongly against, it very well could be the Roman Empire. But certainly this beast predates the Roman Empire. And I would even suggest to you that that beast is still in existence today. So we're not talking about a city-state of Rome. We're talking about a spiritual entity. All right. And we'll see as we go further, we'll see how that plays itself out. We also mentioned about this idea of this dual track going from Genesis all the way through Revelation. We always see righteousness, and we also see rebellion, starting in the garden. Okay. And throughout Scripture, that theme also plays itself out and is depicted as women. Okay. So that's what this slide is about. There were 2 women that we're looking at in the book of Revelation. One of them is the woman that's clothed with the sun and having 12 stars over her head. I'm sorry, the moon over her head and 12 stars under her feet. And we know that woman is Israel, but it's less Israel, the nation, and more Israel, the purpose, with the purpose that the Most High has for Israel, which is to be the contact point for righteousness and heaven's rulership on the earth. So that is described as a woman in Revelation chapter 12, verse 14. Conversely, there's another woman that we're going to be looking at in more detail this evening, and that's the Great Harlot. That's the woman that is sitting on the beast that we just talked about in Revelation chapter 17. So both of those women are involved in last or eschatology, if you will, or the last day happenings. So one of the things that we can see is that, remember, we've also said that in this dual track, many times both good and evil exist in the same place at the same time. It's almost like that book that was written. It was the best of times and it was the worst of times. Okay, so it's that idea that the best and the worst are manifesting themselves simultaneously. That's also the case when it comes to this idea of a wilderness, and that's why we're starting with this. So the woman that's clothed with the sun was actually protected in the wilderness for 3.5 years. And when that word is described, which is eremos in Strong's 2048, it says it's a desert. Okay. But in this case, it's the place where the Most High richly grants his presence and provision for those seeking him. And so even in the desert or in the wilderness, when you're a part of the Most High's people, he takes care of you. So when the woman is in the wilderness, the woman that's clothed with the sun, when she's in the wilderness for those 3.5 years, she's in the wilderness and she's protected. The great harlot is also in the wilderness. And when the great harlot is in the wilderness, that is actually the scene that John has his vision around when it comes to understanding the nature of evil. So he's in Revelation chapter 17, verse 3, it says he sees, well, actually, let me just read it. He says, so he carried me away, talking about the angel, in the spirit into the wilderness. And I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet colored beast full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 7 horns. And I'm sorry, 7 heads and 10 horns. And then it talks about how the woman was arrayed. But he sees the vision of the woman in the wilderness. This is where his vision of this woman is. Okay. And everything that happens as a result of this vision of the woman, he's looking at it in the wilderness. The woman, every way that the Most High decides to bring judgment upon this woman, the vision is given to John while the woman is in the wilderness. So I wanted to juxtapose those two things, because the righteous are in the wilderness, but so are the unrighteous. And so the wilderness, as defined for the unrighteous, it could be an uncultivated or an unpopulated place. It's a desolate place or a deserted area, a barren or a solitary place. So we get the idea that depending on the state of your heart, the state of your being, or in this case, the state of the woman and who the woman represents, well, both women actually, that wilderness can either be a positive place or a negative place. Now, getting back to the woman clothed with the sun, her time in the wilderness is limited, 3.5 years. In the spirit, there is no time limit on how long the whore remains in the wilderness. And we're going to revisit that as well. So while the woman is in, the woman clothed with the sun is in the wilderness, she receives power from the Most High through her submission. The whore has been exercising power. And the way that the whore has been exercising power is through religion, through trade, and a political mechanism, including the military, that allows this entity to stay in power. Okay, so this is a self-directed exercise of power, whereas in the case with the woman that's clothed with the sun, she receives the power from heaven because of her submission to the Most High. Okay, well, we're going to continue now. All right, so we're going to look now more closely at this detailing on the judgment, or of the judgment of the whore that's called Mystery Babylon. So again, in Revelation chapter 17, verse 5, the woman is actually given the name. And verse 5 says, upon her forehead, a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Remember the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. So we see here that Mystery Babylon the Great is the mother of harlots and the mother of abominations of the earth. So the Most High's people are told in Revelation chapter 18, I think it's 18. Yeah. That they need to come out of her because of who she is. Now, there's a reason why it says Mystery Babylon. It's to bring our attention away from trying to figure out things in our own mindsets and receive the things of the Most High from heaven, so that we can get the larger picture. Because again, Revelation is painting a larger picture. So Babylon is called Mystery Babylon because it's not just a city. Okay, Mystery Babylon has been on the earth based on this description from the very beginning of when sin manifested itself on the earth. And that's why we're saying that dual track can be found in Revelation. So the Most High's people from the garden all the way through Revelation have been told to come out of her. At this point in time, her sins have reached heaven. And so when we read Revelation chapter 18, we're just going to remind ourselves of some of the things that were mentioned. Her rewards will be double according to her works. There comes a point in time when evil will be rewarded for what it has been producing. Now, in the community, we say what goes around comes around. Scripture, in the scriptures, the Messiah said, "You will reap what you sow," and so evil will be repaid. And that's why the Most High tells his people to not seek vengeance on our own. That's why he tells us, vengeance is mine, I will repay. He's going to repay double for all of the evil that Mystery Babylon has done to his people. And the scriptures say we are his people, the sheep of his pasture. So anything that has been done to us, anything that is being done currently against us, the Most High remembers all of it. And our enemy called Mystery Babylon, will pay. And anyone who is working with our enemy will also pay. That is a biblical and spiritual principle. And not only that, it says her sorrow, look again, the Mystery Babylon is called a whore, which means that it's a woman. And so her sorrow will be in proportion to how she lived deliciously. In other words, as we see those who are living large, as the euphemism goes, if they are living large based on their exploitation of other people, whether it be other people's things, whether it be other people's souls, whether it be other people's lives, because you do know that in order for there to be billionaires, there have to be paupers. You can't be a billionaire if there's nobody that you're over. So the whole concept of get as much as you can and then can everything that you get and then sit on the can, that is not a concept that comes from heaven. That's a concept that comes from hell. And that's the mystery Babylon that we are currently living under as we speak. So all of those who are taking advantage of this now, but again, we're talking about primarily a spirit. That spirit is in control now. That's the same spirit that took our Savior to the top of this mountain, showed him all the nations in the world in a moment of time, and said, all of this I'll give to you if you just fall down and worship me. I can give it to you because it's been delivered to me. So that's the source of Mystery Babylon. And that source has human beings doing its bidding. The human beings get paid. But that's why Jesus said, those who are unrighteous, you get your payment now. Those who are righteous, you'll get what you need now, but your payment comes when everything is balanced out. So those who are doing well now, based on their exploitation of other people, let me just say this, because Revelation is just as real today as it was when John wrote it. Okay. If you look at the cities in the world, but specifically since we live in this country, that are engaged in what is now the cleaned up euphemism called gentrification, when in actuality all it is moving poor people out of the way because rich people want what they have. But in any case, wherever you have gentrification, you also have tent cities. They go hand in hand. You can't have super rich people without having super poor people. I didn't make this up. I'm just feeding back to you what is obvious if you just look at the culture the way it is. So there are people living deliciously because someone else is living in a tent. That is a part of this great whore. That's the mystery Babylon. And she is going to be burned, which is the reason why the Spirit says, come out of her and don't partake with her in her evil good deeds. Now, Satan, or the dragon, uses on this earth minerals, stones, water, and now even air, to maintain control over the planet. Okay. And so anyone who's working with Satan has control of those resources, because that's how Satan manipulates people, and how Satan continues to have control. So the people who do that best are called merchants, and they gain their riches by trading with Mystery Babylon, that great city. But it's not a city as we know it. It's a city in the spiritual realm, in a negative sense, the way that the New Jerusalem is a city. The New Jerusalem is a city that's going to be coming down. We haven't gotten to that yet. We will, Father willing, the next couple of lessons, but coming down out of heaven to rule on the earth. So that means that right now, the New Jerusalem is not ruling on earth. Some of the New Jerusalem citizens are on earth as ambassadors to the earth, so that the earth can understand there's a kingdom coming. Y'all need to get ready for this kingdom, because this is a kingdom of righteousness, and all this unrighteousness is going to be burnt up. So that's what's happening. But right now, the people who have the resources have those resources because they belong to this Babylonian system, this mystery Babylon. And the ones who do it best have the most money. So even in a time of relative famine, well, I say relative because it depends on where you are on the earth. Now, I'm not just talking about the United States of America. This spirit is everywhere. There's no place that you can go where this spirit is not in control. No place on the planet. That's why when we read about the mark of the beast and people not being able to buy or sell without that mark, that's already in process. But it's not the mark itself, it's what happens as a result of evil people being controlled by an evil spirit, by a principality, by a power, by a ruler of the darkness of this world. Those people being underneath the influence of that entity have more power over everyone because they are a part of that system. And they get rich, not spiritually, financially. They buy islands. The Most High has not told individuals to do that. Okay, how are you going to determine or for yourself? Well, I think all this land along the seashore should be mine, so I'm going to make some rules, and it is mine. And if y'all want to come there, you have to pay me. That's the kind of world we live in. Okay, so what the scriptures are saying, though, is that mystery Babylon that makes merchants rich are going to mourn. Those merchants are going to mourn because at some point in the very near future, no one's going to buy her goods anymore. Okay. As a matter of fact, the scriptures say in 1 hour, her riches will come to nothing. And so then the holy apostles and the prophets of the Most High and the holy people of the Most High, heaven says, now I'm finally going to avenge you of this mystery Babylon, this system, because it's going to be found no more. So that's what's on the horizon. It says also the light of a candle shall shine no more. In other words, there's not going to be any what we would call positive coming out of mystery Babylon, including the idea of, marrying and giving in marriage. I didn't mean to do that. Marrying and giving in marriage. None of that's going to be happening. finally says that Mystery Babylon has in her, see, this is how we know this is talking about on the earth and in the earth, because in Mystery Babylon, the blood of the prophets, the blood of the saints or the holy ones, and all that were slain upon the earth happened in Mystery Babylon. In other words, just like the previous chapters we're talking about, when Satan in his wrath is coming at the Most High's people, all of the destruction that's coming upon them, the Father sees it. And so if you're working with and for Satan, he sees you too. And all of that blood is on your hands. Now, if I don't tell you that, then your blood is on my head because I have not warned you. That's one of the reasons why this study is being done. We're at the point in time where these things are playing themselves out and people are sleepwalking and don't even understand that Mystery Babylon is fallen. That's we forgot to mention that. It doesn't say Babylon will fall. It doesn't say Babylon has fallen. It says Babylon is fallen. In other words, Babylon, this Mystery Babylon, is in a state of decay. So it's not coming back because it's evil and it must be destroyed. That's what's on the horizon. And sitting on top of all of that I just described is this whore who has been reaping the benefits of Mystery Babylon. And that's why it says Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. So she has, there's another place that says the names of blasphemy are written on her as well. So blasphemy is speaking against the Most High. So in essence, all of the things that are going on, the scriptures in Revelation are bringing them to John's attention so that he can understand all that has happened before, all that's happening now, and all that will happen. The Most High has all of this underneath his purview. He has not forgotten any of it, and he is going to judge it just as he said he would. But first, he's going to start with you. If you belong to him, judgment must first begin at the house of the Most High. So that's going on too. So now the Revelation chapter 17 and verse 18, there are several names of the same spiritual entity. Now, verse 1 of 17 calls it the Great Whore. Verse 5 of 17 calls it Mystery Babylon the Great. Again, the mother of harlots, that's another name, and abominations. It's called that great city which reigns over the kings of the earth in verse 18 of Revelation chapter 17. And then in Revelation chapter 18, it's called, again, Babylon. So basically chapter 18, and that's kind of where we'll start wrapping up. Chapter 18 is more delineation of what it looks like when the Most High says that Babylon is fallen. This is when we read all of those issues that Babylon had and all of the destruction that was coming, that was the detailing of what we were told in Revelation chapter 17. Now, there's one other thing, just so that we can continue to point out that this is not talking specifically or exclusively about any one nation or any one city or any one city state. In Revelation chapter 11, verse 8, remember when those two witnesses were witnessing? when we read that, those two witnesses were actually witnessing to the coming destruction of the people and the system. But they were doing this in what was called that great city. Again, names for the same spiritual entity. Well, what was that great city? They were witnessing outside and inside of Jerusalem. That's where this witnessing took place. So in Revelation chapter 11, verse 8, we read this, but to remind us, I'll start in verse 7. And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascends out of the bottomless pit or the abyss shall make war against them and shall overcome them and kill them, and their dead bodies will lie in the street of the great city. And then it's explained, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified. So even in this case, the spiritual entity's name, another name for this spiritual entity is Jerusalem. It's also Sodom. It's also Egypt. Well, how can that be? It's because all of the actions are what determine what this Babylonian entity is. Again, Babylon is in control of everything, including at that point in time, Jerusalem. So that great city in Revelation chapter 11, verse 8, is that city that's spiritually called Sodom, it's called Egypt, and it's called Jerusalem. What do Sodom, Egypt, and Jerusalem all have in common? Rebellion against the Most High. What did Babylon have in common with those three? Rebellion against the Most High. That's how the name came to be came to our attention back in Genesis chapter 11. When that tower was built, that was going to be built going up into heaven, and the Most High had to come down and confuse the languages, because he said all these people are of one mind, and if they put their mind to it, there's nothing that they can't do. So he put a stop to that. That's where the name Babel comes from. And again, Babel and Babylon are the same Hebrew word. So Babylon is mystery if you don't know what the word of the Most High has been saying. But if you know what the word of the Most High is saying, the mystery Babylon is any organized, rebellious entity from Genesis all the way through Revelation. And so, having said all of that, yes, you can say, well, in our little world, we could say, well, certainly that sounds like, well, New York City, for instance, or for that matter, some of the other cities that have great wealth and also great poverty, and people, a very small group of people who control everything. But that system itself is based on this larger spiritual entity. Well, and yeah, as we close, I'll just mention this. We haven't gotten to say a lot about it, but if you remember, that beast eventually destroys the whore. So the whore that's been riding on that beast is itself destroyed or made desolate. Okay, so that's how we know that beast itself is controlling the great whore as well. But the great whore is the point of contact and is underneath the jurisdiction of this beast, even though the great whore is riding the beast. And again, the beast is representative of all the kings and all the nations of the world, and the whore is riding on top of that which seems to be in control. Well, the great whore, in that sense, is the elite of the planet. Whether they be religiously elite, whether they be politically elite, whether they be financially elite, that is the great whore, because everybody has to bow down to them. And what they say goes. Whatever they come up with, that's how the world goes. They have already determined what's going to be happening in the world. Okay, that's that great whore. But so in their mind, that's what they're doing. But in the serpent's mind, the serpent is bringing everything to bear on Armageddon when he brings all of his resources against the Lamb. That's what's on the horizon. And that's what, see, the great whore has to be brought down so that true intent can be made manifest. And we're sort of in that time as well right now when these things are playing themselves out. So I think that was all. Yeah, that was all I wanted to cover. So we covered Revelation chapter 18, and Father willing, we will begin wrapping things up. As we said before, what we've been looking at is Revelation through the view, if you will, of the sevens. There were 23 of them that we've actually covered, believe it or not. And there are two more that are not in the same location. They're more concepts, but there are 7 of those as well. That you could call, one of them is called blessings or beatitudes. So as we wrap Revelation up, we're going to talk about those next, and then we'll move as the Spirit gives us the instruction. So we give thanks to the Father for what He has shown us this evening. We give thanks for Revelation chapter 18, talking about the details of the destruction of the great whore. We give thanks for the fact that, as we have said before, we have read the entire book. We've read the end of the book, and the Most High's people win because He is the conqueror. He is the King of Kings. He is the Lord of Lords. And as we are His people and the sheep of His pasture, all of these blessings accrue to us, His people. So the Father bless you and keep you. The Father make His face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Father lift up His countenance upon you and your family and give you His